I will. Let's pray. Gracious God, too often we ignore your gracious, redemptive action in our lives. We forget to remember that we need not to be enslaved by anxiety and loss of confidence. We forget our deep connection neighbors. Forgive us, O God. We'll try harder. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
Amen. Oh, here, I will light a candle to symbolize that we're entering into time of worship. I mean, it's not exactly worship, but that's something we have been advised to do as part of our ritual at a distance, is have symbols of space there. Okay. Well, I would rather meet you in person, but I am very pleased to be with you here. The first thing I want to do is review last week a little bit, because I can see that you watched my video, which that's cool. Thanks. I made that. That's cool. But, you know, I had kind of forgotten what we said since then. Here, let's see if I can do this. Okay. Share my desktop. Okay, so far so good. Okay, well, maybe that doesn't work. I'll have to figure that out in a... No, okay. I'll have to test it later, make sure I can use it for Sunday. Okay, so last week we talked about, or I talked about, and you watched me talk, Sabbath as witness. And it was around this idea of being a community that loves our neighbor. And what it means to be a contrast community. Let's see. Brueggeman called Sabbath this miniature jubilee where it allows people to be more economically equal. Those of us that make more or have more economic power than others by practicing Sabbath, you know, we are all equally of worth on a day that we're not working, right? And he talked about this idea that if we redefine the purpose of life as centered around community and well-being of the whole community, Sabbath allows people to come into that community. It's a way to, if the boundaries and ways to be admitted to a community aren't based on ethnicity, but instead are based on practice, especially Sabbath practice, that's the way people can join it. So that was part of that. I really wanted to just show you guys this, and I thought I'd just click share and then desktop, and now I want to click share again, but it's all I can click is cancel. Oh, I did it. Okay. Okay, so here I'm screen sharing, and you can see my stuff. And so, you know, I make lesson plans, and you're all very impressed at my organization. And this is what I would have taught. So, you know, I prepared ahead of time, and I had a week 4 session prepared. And it would have included you all giving testimony on how you had been practicing Sabbath, how you had been experiencing it, how it was working, and people sharing that takes quite a bit of time. And then we would have had time to reflect, and then we would have, and we would have tried to draw connections among these. You know, whatever worked for Jerry may have not worked for Pat, and we would have drawn connections. And then I would have asked you, like, what are you going to keep doing in the future, and what are you going to stop doing? I mean, that seems like just a really, basic course review. Hey, what have you done? How has it worked? How is it alike or unlike? What are we going to do in the future? But y'all, the last 3 weeks have been crazy pants. And I don't say that lightly. Crazy pants. Somebody just drove by my house in a Model T. Okay. Hear your feedback from the ideas of session 3. Sabbath practice. This is the thesis. Sabbath practice as community should typify the reign of God. So, we should be revealing the reign of God. And our Sabbath values our neighbors, thereby witnessing to them that the reign of God is good and inviting them into the Sabbath community. So that was the basis of session 3, and I would like to hear your feedback on it. I think a really interesting discussion question would be, Tim has been calling this time enforced Sabbath. And so in enforced Sabbath, where and how do we find true Sabbath? Especially if Sabbath is marked by worship and rest. How are we finding worship and rest in essentially lockdown? And then, if you follow the news, you probably heard that the president had called for packed churches on Easter, which is, I bet you all could get really into discussing that. And then our Mennonite pastor, Melissa Fleur-Bixler, wrote a rebuttal that's on Sojourners, that's titled, "I refuse to participate in worship that leads to devastation." And I expect that you all could really dig into this third section here in the arrows. So maybe let's start up. Let's start with session 3, just this idea that Sabbath invites our neighbors into community. Oh, did that work?
Good. Yes.
Sweet. Okay, so what do you think?
I think in normal times, that's certainly something I find value in. That's kind of the essence of ethics. But in these times, social distancing and stay at home kind of conflict with that. So that's a teaching that doesn't always apply in extreme situations like this one.
Could you unmute that?
I did.
Oh, okay. Hey, Asia, when your lead-in, when you were reviewing last week, you said that Sabbath was connected to the purpose of life, and I just kind of missed what your point was there. Could you just go back and take a look at that and tell me what I missed?
Yeah, I missed the second part of that too.
She's talking, but I can't.
Hey, yeah, my mic was muted. I closed that document, but I think what I was talking about there was so if part of our purpose as a church is Sabbath community, right? Sabbath should fulfill this purpose of witnessing to people. And it does that, according to Brueggeman, in at least 2 ways. One, by if we define our community around Sabbath, that allows other people to join. Mm-hmm. But 2, if we practice Sabbath and Sabbath shows love of neighbor, which is part of his thesis, then by showing love of neighbor, we're showing the reign of God.
Okay, thanks. And because I interrupted the flow of thought, what was the question that Pat had just answered, so we can get back on track?
Oh, we were just discussing last week's thesis, which is Sabbath values our neighbors by witnessing them and inviting them to community. Sabbath practice as community should typify the reign of God.
Yeah, yeah. And now in these extreme circumstances, the reign of God is manifested in social distancing, isn't it? Because that's how we show care for neighbor, which is kind of ironic, to say the least.
Yeah.
Also,
although there's connection we can make with people that doesn't require physical proximity, you know.
yeah, and we're doing it.
And we're doing some of it right now, you know, with connecting with each other.
Yeah.
And I think I was telling somebody yesterday, Tom, way up on the scaffolding on the south side of our house, has talked to more neighbors in the last week and a half. We're caught up on all the neighborhood gossip and all the trials and tribulations of our neighbor whom central inspection is hounding, and et cetera, et cetera. So in some ways it's different, you know, you're not standing 2 feet away from the neighbor, but yeah, Tom has talked to lots of people.
Mhm. Well, there's also, in these extreme circumstances, a sense of sharing in the universality of humanity and the weakness that we all share. So whether or not you're Skyping to somebody in Tokyo, or you're talking to somebody you've never met, we all are experiencing the angst of this time, which kind of draws us together. So it really is an in a Brueggeman mentions a little bit.
Well, it is the great equalizer. I mean, presumably none of us have immunity to the coronavirus.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
We're rich or poor, we're in the same boat. However, probably the elite are more likely to get a ventilator than the poor.
Yeah. 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 Or a test, or testing.
Or testing, yes.
Well, one of the hallmarks of Sabbath is worship. I mean, part of the heart of Sabbath is worship. And how we worship is witness. By not meeting together to worship is witness, but in what ways can our worship be a witness now? Like, those are questions, you know?
Yeah. Well, one thing we noticed on Sunday was when we tried to get online at 10 o'clock in the morning, all the other churches were doing the same thing. Well, that's kind of an interesting witness. We bogged down the network by our trying to come together. And in a way, it's a strange witness, but for people who are trying to get online at 10 o'clock in the morning, they're going, what's going on? You know, all these churches are trying to get online now. So.
Well, and the church is really, we're interested in meaning making, you know, and so in times of great crisis, people that, you know, have been going along kind of fine, that need some schema for making sense of what's going on in their lives are more attracted to us now than other times.
I'm also wondering whether there's some people who might join us online who might be, or otherwise reluctant to visit us in person. Maybe this could be an entry point for people to get to know us online. And then maybe once we come together, maybe they'll be brave enough to see us in person.
I noticed that our Facebook posts have been watched by more people, significantly more people recently than they have in the past.
Yeah, and so I had been, last week I posted myself reading the Anabaptist devotional in the morning and the evening. And like, I was like, if that helps anybody, if anybody wants to watch it, that's great. But like, I need this for me. And so I was doing it, and like, I can see the number of views, like, and I can see the number of views on YouTube. And about every one of those was getting 7 or 8 views. And I was like, well, 6 of those might be my mom. I don't know, you know? But that's really nice. You know, some people are watching this, and probably I think I have a pretty nice reading voice. Maybe it's soothing and it feels good to me. Well, there's been a lot of interest in it. And a lot of other pastors contacted me and said, we want to do this with you. How do we do this? And so we're moving to where with these other pastors, we're doing it communally in the morning. And by the end of this week, I hope that we're also streaming it on Facebook. And so I think that's a witness that are like how boring is just me reading prayers for 10 minutes? But we have like 70 views on some of those.
Wow.
Yeah.
There have been a lot of things I didn't expect. Like, people that are teaching online, including Tim, are reporting that their students' attendance is fantastic, that they're very engaged, and that they're doing their homework.
Maybe they don't have anything else to do except homework now.
Maybe they're longing for anything normal in their life.
Yeah. Well, I have used the prayer book by myself a lot. But I think it's more rewarding to do it with other people.
Well, this is a good time to transition to that second question. Here, I'll pull it up again because I'm feeling fancy. We're here in enforced Sabbath, which is what Tim calls it. I think we've already started to transition to this. Here we are in enforced Sabbath. So how do we ourselves find true Sabbath here? Sabbath being marked especially by worship and rest.
That's a good question, because Pat and I are finding that we're not resting very much. It might be because it's the week of my leading worship and Pat preaching, so we are kind of consumed with that. But for some reason, we're not doing very good at this forced Sabbath. We're still keeping pretty busy.
I don't know, we watched a movie every evening,
Well, that's true.
so.
We do try to make that goal.
Well, I've taken on more work, so today I'm going to be teaching online to intellectually disabled students, so that's going to be interesting. And then I'm also going to be teaching online to teachers, that starts in May, that are teaching intellectually disabled students. So my load just really went up. So I'm a busy person. I'm no longer a retired individual.
Yowzy.
I think the challenge is to actually do things that rest and restore us versus distract us. The temptation is always to do what distracts.
And I find what I picked up are kind of restorative to me. So even though it's work, it's not distraction, it's restorative.
Yeah. Well, I cannot say that I've had a whole lot of extra time on my hands, except with the children being gone. So I've done a lot of reading, but I think the challenge is to remain, remain to have a sense of trust in God when there's a lot of news out there that could be frightening. When I work and I can't seem to find masks, or at least they're in low supply, things like that. It's a little bit, can be a little bit concerning.
I have found normal work taking longer than usual. And part of that is I'm emotionally distracted, partly with the humans in my house, because I used to work from home by myself. And now Tim and the kids are here. Part of it is the emotional distraction of a worldwide catastrophe, right? And so things that would normally take me however long take me half again as long. And now, so I'm saving time on driving to see you. Like I didn't drive down tonight, but to record things and post them and send them out and write the emails takes a surprising amount of time versus just speaking, especially on things like, if I would normally just say something to you, I can write down 3 or 4 words and go. But like if I'm sending you an email, I need to write out all the words. So I have found myself busier, and I definitely have an emotional and psychic fatigue that is not, and I'm working on it. I mean, I talked to my spiritual director today. I got some extra sleep today, but I have a fatigue that is not physical.
Well, for worship this Sunday, it's going to be a little bit more work for everybody. We're all going to have to do homework. And because you're going to have to read the sermon, you're going to have to read the whole thing. I mean, it's probably going to be a good half hour of prep. And so that's a real different experience too for all of us to sort of feel like it's homework. I mean, we don't have to think of it that way, but
that's very Anabaptist.
To what?
That we all have to do our own worship at home.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Especially in this church, starting with house churches.
Yeah.
We'll have to get Lois's book out about the house churches again here.
You want to know something interesting? A few months ago, Whiffenstock Publishers contacted me. They want to republish that book.
Wow.
Which one is that?
Building the House Church.
Okay.
It was published 30-some years ago. But they are building a whole shelf full of publications on house churches. Or maybe that will be newly relevant in this age.
Well, I know I just moved it up from my downstairs bookshelf to my upstairs bookshelf, so. With the plans to look into it again.
We'll have to do that.
I look forward to your tithe. Let me check the time. Okay, do we want to get into some meat of this political stuff? Because we're talking about Sabbath as resistance. Okay, we're gonna do it. I believe in us.
Go for it.
Okay, hang on. Share desktop. Share. Okay. You can see my arrows. It says in the light of Sabbath as resistance. And of course, that's resistance to culture, resistance to anxiety, resistance to commodity, resistance to empire. Let's underline resistance to empire. Resisting all those idols that aren't God, capitalism, professional sports, whatever it is that, you know, we put in the place of God and let have our worship. Sabbathing the one living God is resistance to that. And so the U.S. president called for packed churches on Easter. And if you haven't seen that story, I mean, here, I just Googled it. But I didn't make this up. Oh wait, did I not? Well, I did Google it, I swear. But the president is hoping for us to have packed churches on Easter. He has set that as sort of a coming out of hiatus deadline, which to many of us doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And then our friend, oops, I accidentally shut that window. Melissa kind of makes me mad because she's like my age and she's got 3 kids and she's pastoring her church and she's written a book and she like says brilliant stuff all the time and she's always publishing articles and she also has depression and like if she was really kind of a crappy person then it would be fine, but she's a really lovely person. And she says, I refuse to participate in worship that leads to devastation. And I don't need to read it word for word. I can send you the article, or you could probably Google it. You're intelligent people. But she says here, Donald Trump thought he was offering me a gift. In defiance of immunologists, scientists, and health experts, the president is pushing for an Easter reopening of our social world, including communal Christian worship. And she quotes him saying, so I think Easter Sunday, and you'll have packed churches all over the country, he touted in a press conference. I think it would be a beautiful time.
Yeah.
And I do expect that when we join together, it will be a beautiful time. And she goes on to say, I can assure Donald Trump that my church will not meet on Easter. To do so, to risk the spread of coronavirus would be denial of my faith and a perversion of my communal worship. And she lists, you know, people from her church that are immunocompromised. But here's her theological part that's pretty. She goes to Isaiah. Isaiah begins with a blast of rage at the religious scrupulousness of those in the besieged city of Jerusalem. The ancient sacrificial system required large amounts of food. During a time of siege, that food was scarce, especially to non-landowners, namely the alien, the orphan, and the widow. Instead of compromising on ceremony and toning down sacrifice during this time when resources were low, the royalty charged with food distribution burnt great quantities of grain, vegetables, and meats as offerings. God's response is devastating. What to me is the multitude of your...
You're off again. You're silent again.
Can you hear us, Asia?
Oh.
Asia? I lost her.
She bent it.
Yeah, it's frozen.
Oh, there I am. I froze up. Well, that's probably enough context. And I guess I don't have even a specific question. I just want to know what you think. You are mature Christians with deep thoughts, and this is a mess, and I just want to know what you think.
Well, we all know that our president is awkward socially. So what he's trying to do here is be encouraging. He doesn't know how, but that's what he's doing. I don't think there's anything deep about it. He speaks before he thinks, and he says, well, this is a neat thing. Let's all meet on Sunday, Easter Sunday. That's something that's a good goal. So he's trying to be encouraging, and he can't do it. But again, that to me, that's all it is.
Well, he also has advisors who are putting economics before human life. I mean, he's for a while he was persuaded by the health experts, and now he's letting Kushner and various economic advisors sway him in the other direction. But the problem is, I mean, even if you agreed with his goal that the economy was more important than human life, the economy is not going to bounce back just because quarantining quits on Easter. He's looking for something that ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
It seems like on the one hand, he wants to stop the coronavirus, so he's following some experts. And that was his speech on Monday. It seemed very positive. Then on Tuesday, he comes out and he says, well, we don't want the cure to be worse than the virus. And the cure is economic devastation. So he wants to get the economy moving again. And so he's saying he wants to open borders on about April 15th, right? And the problem is when you look at the bell curves about when we're going to hit the worst of death rate and infection rate, it's between April 15th and May 15th. So he wants us to go back full bore, show up to church and worship and so forth, and let's just forget it and pretend it's over and get on with boosting the economy. And I think that Doug may be right. He's maybe trying to be encouraging, but I think underneath all of this is he's very concerned about the economy, and he wants to get the show on the road, and he's not so concerned about, you know, 1 million or 2 million people dying. We have more important things to get on with. So I'm very suspicious of Donald Trump with anything having to do with religion. He's not a religious person in my mind. He doesn't understand religion. He uses religion. So,
you know what he told somebody once his favorite Bible verse was?
2 Corinthians something, I don't know.
No, an eye for an eye.
Oh, an eye for an eye. Yeah, right.
True.
Well, it became very clear that when they asked him about forgiveness, he said, well, why should I ask God forgiveness? I haven't done anything wrong. I don't ask God for forgiveness. That was back in 2016. Everybody was shocked, but now we're not. So
I appreciate Doug's interpretation though, because it is more charitable than anything I had found in myself. And being able to be charitable, like here is a person that at least is trying to be encouraging.
yeah.
Helps me find a compassion for his humanity that I need to be able to find.
Yeah. So you're saying Doug is a very charitable person and he sees the positive even in somebody like Donald Trump. Well,
yeah. May we all be as positive. May we all be charitable people.
Sure. And like Nancy Pelosi praying for Donald Trump. That's the charity I extend to him.
But it's also, I guess my big question too is, you know, how are we as the church when the church is divided in its opinions very strongly as well? So just today I've been on my Facebook feed, there's people posting Trump praying and how wonderful that is. And so there's different perceptions of who he is within the church with very strong feelings either way. So how, I guess my question is, how do we then, how are we church together? Because there seems to be a lot of hatred between two sides, and distrust, I guess.
That's what Brueggeman says. He talks about that in the book about, of course, it's probably easy to do Sabbath with the neighbors who are like us, but the neighbors who aren't, how do we do Sabbath so that we're all equal on Sabbath, you know? This divide that's in the nation right now.
The quality that Sabbath brings, as far as I see, it was an economic one. In other words, you rest, your neighbor rests, your animal rests. And this is to put human and animal welfare above economic gain. Well, it seems to me that our president and certain elements of our society are putting economic gain ahead of the welfare of society. So it's what I see happening politically when Donald Trump does that. It's Sabbath breaking in the highest order.
I read a commentary today on seeking the common good in this time. And I have long believed that that's what government is for, is to seek the common good. And I think my question is, how can we inject care for the common good into the political conversation?
Is Belinda trying to say something?
I think that's just the background on Belinda's phone. Belinda, if you want to press *6, it'll mute your mic. And then if you want to say something, you press *6 again. You're definitely not bothering us in any way. Just like if somebody is being loud in the background, we occasionally hear something, but it's not bothersome.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, to follow up with Lois's thought about the government promoting the common good, I think there are two elements, and one is to protect society, and the other is to promote human flourishing. So on the one hand, you have the promotion of human flourishing through education and so forth, and on the other hand, you have to protect society through medicine and so forth. Those are two vital functions of government, and I'm an anarchist, so I'm really pretty down on the government. But the government does have a legitimate role, and that would be two of them, right out of, by the way, Romans 13. Seeking the common good is right out of Romans 13.
Well, isn't that just like the basic social contract? Is like we gather together in groups and then we decide to not kill each other because that's common good, and it just kind of builds up. Isn't that the social contract?
The
social contract is much more for the benefit of the autonomous individual.
Okay.
And common good is also recognizing a good for the community as a communal entity. And I mean, I think obviously societies need to value both individuals and community. But I think in this kind of hyper-modern era that we live in, society has tilted more toward the good of the individual,
Well,
and less for the common good. And when I listen to politicians or read them, I always look for, do they even mention the common good?
yes, I mostly agree, except I do think there's some oligarchy to that. So like in the last 48 hours, the lieutenant governor of Texas was like, well, you know, the older people need to just sacrifice themselves for the economy. Like, people are going to die, but it's going to be old people, and we got to restart the economy. I mean, we can set aside the fact that that's.
Well, I didn't consider.
Oops.
Yeah.
I didn't consider him an example of seeking the common good.
No, but follow me here. Okay, my stuff locked up for a minute. So, yeah, okay. But now I lost my train of thought because my stuff locked up. The setting aside that we're going to sacrifice the elderly for our economic system, that's gross. People who have retired and their income is on stock income or something of that nature, or they're the landholders, those people won't be exposed. They can afford to self-quarantine. But the working poor, many of whom are elderly, are the people that will suffer. And so I think that it's not at all about the common good, but it's about the common good for the top few. So that's why I'm thinking oligarchy.
Well, the problem is though, is if the bottom poor, more of them die, there's nobody to do the work for the rich to get richer. So maybe then we'll have Mexicans and border people coming across at more numbers and we'll want them.
Well, rather than an oligarchy, I think it's more of a plutocracy. A plutocracy is the rich control. And that is a problem we face. I mean, you look at how our candidates are chosen. We look at how Bloomberg can come in there with billions of dollars and all of a sudden he's a candidate. Well, who of us could do that? Well, that is witnessing to the plutocracy that runs our country. Well, when you think about the common good, and I'm going to misquote Karl Marx here, but from each according to his ability and to each according to his or her need, something like that, right? We give out of what we have, and then to those who have need, receive. There's something that's rather Christian about that, I think. I've always kind of seen that lurking around 1 Corinthians somewhere. And maybe Karl Marx picked it up there. I don't know, but I know that Mennonites have quoted that off and on over the last century. Am I wrong about that? So in other words, there is a seeking of common. People give out of what they have, and they receive because they have certain needs, and that kind of is an equalizer. That gets rid of the plutocracies, the oligarchies.
The other Mennonite Christian anarchists I know say the same thing.
Well, a lot of the early anarchists in the 1800s were communists, like Kropotkin and so forth. So and Mennonite Central Committee seems very much like a lot of the communist committees that emerged in the pre-1930s. So I may be wrong about that. I don't know the history of that organization. But mutual aid is.
Mutual aid sounds communist to you? That's crazy.
Midnight Central Committee was started in 1920, I believe.
Yeah, now that's the era when you have the emergence of strong communism and the threat to the kings of Europe and so forth. They were very fearful of communism.
In the post-Vietnam War era, when MCC was working had some people in Vietnam working, the Vietnamese Communist Central Committee talked to them. Well, you talk to your Central Committee about this.
Yeah.
Well, oh, Doug's got something. You have something, Doug? Oh, I thought you were poised.
You're
So I'm assuming,
I might have to go in my drawer and pull up my American flag in case anybody's listening in on this.
This is what's going to attract people to our church. I heard something about radical biblical spirituality. I heard something. Well, I think there's definitely some irony in that we have been saying for weeks that Sabbath is resistance, and we resist empire by meeting for worship, and we are fixing to resist empire by refusing to meet for worship.
the irony, yeah.
Uh-huh.
That's textbook definition. Where do we go from here? I know that we don't know how long this will last. We don't know how long we'll be quarantined. We don't know how the world will look after that. But visioning what it means to be a people together, a worshiping people, like what steps do we take forward in practicing Sabbath?
I've been thinking today that not having church as normal might be a good thing. And that it might be an opportunity to have some conversations about what does it mean to be, what is our goal or our purpose? And what after having experienced church in a very different way, is there any learning that we've had that would impact how we go forward in the future?
That would be a good conversation or something to think about throughout, because I think that no matter what the circumstances, who is president, who is not, what type of political system we live under, and that all influences how we do church. And whenever there's a change of circumstances, then we reassess our faith commitment and the ways we do our church. Yeah.
One thing that might happen is that without meeting on Sunday, let's say for 6 months or 6 weeks or 3 months, whatever it is, many people will find out that they don't really need church. They don't need to come on Sunday. In fact, a lot of nominal Christians won't return, maybe only 80% of the people that were going to church return. And this may have a weeding.
And the other 80 is dead.
What's that?
And the other 80 is dead. No, I just needed to be really dark for a second. This is just all really hard. Okay, I'm listening.
I'm just thinking that maybe this is a way to get rid of a lot of nominal Christians. Because they'll find out that, hey, it's a lot easier not going to church on Sunday. And by the way, I didn't need it anyway. And so the people that return to gathering on Sunday to worship might be a healthier church.
And then the other thing we talked about earlier is maybe people can join us who don't really want to come to church, but it can not only within the city, but then people can join us outside of our area.
Yeah.
Like we had the other day with Suzanne. Yeah.
Yeah. One thing that we haven't really talked about regarding Sabbath is we're talking about not working, resting. It seems that we're taking it very literally, and I'm wondering if Sabbath is more of an attitude of, even when we're working hard, can we not also rest while we are working hard? I think of practices of non-attachment, because what you do is you do what you think is right, and you don't worry about the outcomes. You trust God, and you just go full force. And you just say, I let go and I let God. And this is the serenity prayer. And this is that platitudinous saying that sounds inane, but isn't. And that is to let go and let God. Isn't that the Sabbath? So I think that living life to its working and resting are not mutually exclusive.
Well,
They can happen simultaneously.
For me, camp is that. I mean, camp is absolutely exhausting. And you work from the moment you wake up at 7 until you finally crawl into bed at midnight, and you don't shower maybe for days, and it's exhausting, but it is a Sabbath.
Yeah.
But I think the danger is to then twist that on people and say, well, even if you're working hard, you can still spiritually Sabbath. If you twist it, you can not allow people a physical rest.
You know, everything can be manipulated, and you can. But I think ultimately, though, if we work at the practices of non-attachment, that might be a way to cultivate a spiritual rest, even though we are busy people.
There's actually a book. What's the name of that?
I had it right here, I thought. Sabbath Sense.
It came out about 20, 25 years ago, but the author addresses that very problem. How can we, in our busyness, still experience Sabbath? So it might be a follow-up, at some point, to what we've gone through the last 4 weeks.
It's called Sabbath Sense, a spiritual antidote for the overworked, by Donna Shaper. I don't know, it'd be a different twist, maybe different than Sabbath as resistance, but.
Well, I love non-attachment. If I ever stop being a Christian, I'm becoming a Buddhist, but I'm really bad at meditation. So, but spiritual non-attachment, like when
She froze again.
Okay, I can hear you. Oh, here we go.
You froze.
All right, we're back. When I was an undergrad and I took courses in Buddhism, I liked it the most of the other world religions. And the principles of non-attachment are very attractive to me. But I just see, and so I love that. And I think that, yes, practicing non-attachment could be a way of Sabbath within, I don't know, I don't like busyness, within work. Non-attachment can be a type of Sabbath within work. But I think as Americans, we want to have our cake and eat it too. We want to not set aside time. We want to not take physical rest, but still get the benefits of Sabbath. And I think there's a danger towards that.
Mm-hmm. I've learned, I'm familiar with Buddhism, but I've learned more about non-attachment from the Hindu tradition. And there, especially in the Bhagavad Gita, it's we do our duty, we do what we should do without trying to control the outcome. In other words, we give the outcome, whatever happens, it's in God's control. And that's when you really feel a type of emotional release. And I think it's Gelassenheit, and Lois and I have talked about this. She's talked about it many times in the prayer of, what is it, detachment, Lois? I forget.
Prayer of abandonment.
Prayer of abandonment, yeah. So it's deep within the Anabaptist tradition, deep within Christianity. I think it's summed up very succinctly with Niebuhr's prayer of serenity. God grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That is non-attachment right there. And if we could practice that, then I don't think we have a lot to worry about in terms of overworking. And that in itself is a type of resistance because we're resisting the coercion of an economy that makes us a cog in a mechanical wheel that moves the economic system forward without considering human welfare.
And that's with political systems.
Yeah, well, of course, that's what I meant. Political systems, economic systems.
Yeah.
They work
Can't change
work
it.
hand in hand.
No, we can't.
Yeah.
That's acceptable.
That's really quality stuff. I've got 2 full pages of notes. Well, we're at time, basically. We have a prayer to say before we go. Does anybody have last words? Not final words, but, ending words.
Never know. It could be final words.
I'm the one that makes dark jokes, Angie.
I missed that one.
I said, you never know. It could be final words. Oh.
Geneva, you have the book, right?
Yes.
Okay, on page 128, would you read the closing?
Last page. Okay. Our master rabbi told a tale of building bigger barns to store more grain, to have more stuff, because the man did not have enough yet. Before he told the tale, he said simply, be on guard against all covetousness, or we translate greed. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. Jesus, Moses, do not covet your neighbor's house. Do not covet your neighbor's wife. Do not covet what belongs to your neighbor. Do not covet. And then 3 times, neighbor, neighbor, neighbor. Want me to keep going? We live, each of us and all of us, in an economy of coveting. The tax and mortgage laws are designed to let the powerful accumulate more. The ads are designed to make us desire what we do not need. The out-of-control military is designed to protect unsustainable advantage of things in the world. The ecological threat is the result of cravings that violate the limit of sustainable creation. The tax laws, the TV ads, the strong military, the ruin of creation, all serve to impinge harmfully upon the neighborhood. The tax and mortgage laws prey upon vulnerable neighbors. The ads seduce us to value things as substitutes for relationships. The military ideology turns neighbors into enemies. The exploitation of the earth refuses to reckon with rabbits and radishes as neighbors. But we have known better since Sinai. We know when we do Sabbath pause that we can live well without an updated computer or phone, without another new car, without elective cosmetic surgery, without remedial drugs, etc., etc., etc. We cannot and have no deep desire to live without neighbors. We confess our anxiety about scarcity, about not yet having enough and being left behind. We confess when we do Sabbath pause that we do not enough, the one close at hand, the one far away, the one who shows mercy, the one who needs mercy. We pledge in your presence greater resolve for Sabbath, that we may submit our reckless anxiety to your alternative future, that we may refocus our lives in your gracious will, that we may trade coveted things for treasured neighbors, that we may come to our true selves, liberated from the tyranny for more. At sundown on Sabbath, we will gladly and loudly declare, free at last. Amen.
Wow.